Hello everyone and welcome to this video, which is in our Great Engine opening series. I'm Grandmaster Matthew Sadler and we are taking another look at the Pircs, and this time an interesting line in the classical Pircs that Dragon favours and that actually looks pretty interesting and pretty good. Yeah, this goes together with a posting on my blog, where I sort of discuss the logic behind it and also what confused me. So do take a look at that as well. This is a little bit more detailed, and I'll also put a PGN up in the normal place with all the variations, and that's really quite a bit. So let's have a look how we get into this system, starting with here we are. So it's e4 d6, d4 knight f6, knight f6, knight c3, g6 knight f3, bishop g7, bishop e2, castles and castles. Karpov's favourite system, yeah, generally very, very solid. If you ask the engines, actually, they suggest e5 as an almost complete equaliser. Yeah, I mean, not necessarily maybe in human games, probably a slight edge in human games, but that is quite interesting. But yeah, it can lead to a lot of simplification. So if you want something a little bit more exciting, then Moskalenko in his book suggests knight c6. So yeah, I mean, you're what are you doing with the knight? Well, you're dangling the knight in front of this double pawn centre, obviously supporting e5 later, and well, asking white to take a decision about development. Now, many moves have been played in human games. H3, bishop e3 are quite common as well. But of course, the most natural move is to play d5. You know, when a knight's dangled like that, and you can chase it away, and it doesn't necessarily have any particular great central outpost. Yeah, it's very natural to chase it away. So Moskalenko suggested knight b8, which is quite interesting. But he did also mention that that knight e5 wasn't bad at all. Gave a few lines in his recent book. Was it the Perfect Pircs Modern? Sorry. But knight e5 is what Dragon was playing as first choice in my engine game. So I thought, well, interesting. Let's have a little look. So knight takes c5 is of course the main line, and then d takes c5. And what is this position? Well, I mean, if you're a 1d4 player, it might remind you of a line in the Leningrad Dutch that Nakamura has played quite a lot. I won't go through all the moves, but this is where it ends up. Knight e5 takes take. So you can see the similarities. And well, they've tried this a lot at the TCC, and actually, it's you know, although the engines always give white a fairly big advantage, actually the engines always seem to be able to make a draw as black. You know, one of black's key ideas is just to go e6 and e takes d5, straighten out the pawn structure like that. Play e4, block out the bishop on g2, and keep on going on with your life. I mean, the fact that white has got a c pawn on c4 is actually a big advantage for white. I mean, you can play c5 and d6, or you can play c5 and c6 and block in the queen side. I mean, this is a little bit on the edge for black, this Dutch Leningrad position, but it is kind of playable. I mean, when you compare that to the line that that we're looking at in the Pircs, then yeah, there's an awful lot that looks a lot better for black. Let me just find the right position there. D takes e5. So first of all, you know, white doesn't have a pawn on c4, so you know, this idea of gaining queenside space, breaking through the centre, is just not available to white. So actually, it's not that easy to think, you know, what the plan is. And whereas for black, you know, there's one very obvious plan, which is to play the move e7 to e6 and e takes d5. Now, I think the most common line in human play is to play bishop e3, with the idea of e6, bishop c5. But yeah, I mean, it's not actually that that threatening. You go rook e8. If d6, this has been played quite a lot in human games, but bishop f8 is actually quite a good reply. So that's pretty decent. And yeah, I mean, bishop b5 is the other move that people play. But then bishop d7 takes, rook takes, queen e2 takes, and b6. And yeah, I mean, there's no danger at all for black here. c6, bishop f8. Yeah, some rooks on the d file, whatever, you know, I mean, it's a perfectly equal position there. Indeed, my engines were agreeing a draw there. So this move bishop b3 is not actually really doing that much, just against this this excellent plan of e6. I mean, White's best move, well, according to the engines, it's a move like a4. I mean, queen d2 looks very sensible. But then we take, and I mean, actually, there's two possibilities. There's c6 was Stockfish's top move for quite a while. B takes c6, rook d1. I mean, I find it hard to believe that White shouldn't be a little bit better here. But yeah, I mean, Stockfish was completely content with playing the black position. But there's a move I somewhat prefer, which is you know, knight e8, just with the idea of playing knight d6 and f5, and you know, this is very, very natural, and yeah, working out pretty well for black. So you know, I mean, that's yeah, not a problem at all for black, really. So I mean, so yeah, I mean, in this position, what the engines want to play is a move that the human players barely play at all, which is bishop c4, and the idea is to prevent e6. Well, you can still play e6, but this is pretty ugly, and yeah, I mean, you know, as black, the engines were suffering. I mean, some wins, you know, a few draws, whatever, especially if Stockfish is playing black, but not at all nice for black. You know, I mean, there's no real counterplay. You don't get the d4 square because White's got c3. You don't get the f4 square because White's got g3. So you know, it's kind of hard to see where your compensation for those pawns is. So what black plays in this position, this is much more exciting, is to play the move knight e8. And yeah, I mean, this is you know, I'm sure this is part of the reason why you know, human players would not really look at bishop c4, because you're playing knight d6 with tempo then, because you're attacking the bishop, and then you're also getting f5 in. And yeah, I mean, I describe in my blog entry, you know, just my thought process and what I thought was good play for White, and why it doesn't turn out to be good play for White. What the engines do, basically, I mean, you've got a couple of ways of reacting to the move f5. The most natural human way is to take gf and play f4. You know, try and just solidify the center in that way, and you know, stop black from expanding too much in the center, but and on the king side. But yeah, the engines don't really see it like that. They don't really see those positions where you go ef and f4 as anything particular for White. What the engines want is something, yeah, quite remarkable. But and yeah, you don't really realise it because the position looks fairly quiet, but there's a lot of subtlety to what's being done there. So let's just have a look at the main line. As I said, there's a PGN with loads and loads of play, including lots of suggestions against the thing that I would consider to be best play, and you'll see why it isn't. But a4, of course, from the engines, always a4. But the idea is to yeah, to try and gain a bit of space on the queen side, just like you know, White does in that Leningrad line, and try and create a few entry points. So knight d6. Oh, sorry. No, sorry. Queen e2 played first. And after knight d6, then the move a4. As you can imagine, it could sort of transpose. So this is actually the first kind of interesting thing, that so this bishop is on c4, preventing e6 still, but actually White's not at all worried about black taking the bishop pair. I mean, you play queen takes c4, and then you're threatening knight b5, of course. So you know, black can play a6. But here, the engines are just sort of thinking that that this is actually just quite pleasant for White, just sort of very calm play here. B5, knight a2, and now playing for c4 and yeah, threatening c5 afterwards. it just turns out to be just a pleasant advantage for white, and obviously without that knight on d6, the whole kingside attack thing doesn't really feel as real for black. So really, I mean, it's only 0.61 for white, this according to Stockfish. So it's not huge, but just knight takes c4. You get the two bishops, but yeah, with one dark squared bishop blocked behind this pawn on e5, you don't really get the dynamics of the two bishops. And yeah, white's got got freedom to expand on the queen side. I mean, obviously you're taking a bishop that was on blocking the c file, so now it's just a knight away, and then the c pawn can move. So that's not too scary, and yeah, I mean, you're going to see that an awful lot in these lines, that right until the last moment, knight takes c4 is not really what black's looking for. So f5 played, that's pretty good, and now f3 from the engines. That's pretty standard reaction there, and yeah, to be honest, I mean, for me, this is the sort of thing that would make me a little bit nervous, because black's playing f4 here, and this is, you can think of all sorts of parallels with the King's Indian, the Mar del Plata, but I mean, the key thing about the Mar del Plata with white in the King's Indian is that white's playing c4 and b4 and c5 and knight b5 and really attacking that queen side. But here, what am I doing here? It's really, I'm really just intuitively, I'm really struggling to find a plan here, because all I can think of is, trying to move these pieces out of the way and play c4 to c5 somehow. Yeah, I mean, I think if I was playing this with white, I'd be maybe looking to play the knight to f2, probably the bishop back to b3, stop e6, and then try and get in c4. But yeah, feels really slow, and yeah, I'm not 100% sure how dangerous this will be. But yeah, I mean, the engines play it quite strangely. Bishop d2, simply. a5 from the engines there. So yeah, I mean, you'll see in the PGN, I mean, you can do all sorts of different move orders, try all sorts of different things, but and it's essentially leading to something similar. So the similar white plan. So yeah, just take a look at the PGN if it's something that you want to look at deeper. I mean, it's just in general that you can get all sorts of very similar positions, but white can get it with a5 and maybe even a6 in, or with a black pawn on a5, and well, the engines simply prefer stopping the pawn on a4 rather than letting it advance, which, to be honest, is true of many positions. I mean, in general, certainly AlphaZero was very well noted for this, for always wanting to block a marching rook's pawn as quickly as possible, not let it advance any further. So a5 played to do that, and then king h1 from white. King h1 doesn't look anything in particular. Well, we'll see how it all fits into the plan. I mean, I was looking at all sorts of active things here. I was looking at for example, after g5, I was looking at stuff like going b4 and knight b5. But yeah, the engine's just never very impressed with any of those ideas. So g5 played, again knight c4, queen c4, knight b5 is going to be a little bit annoying there moving forwards. So g5 played by black. And now a really strange move, and looking at it, I sort of had the feeling, that, you could show me this game from the 1980s, as if it was a game from the 1980s, with an old computer playing this, and I would have believed it somehow, because the moves, they don't really seem to make that much sense, really. Because here, Stockfish was playing rook ad1. And this is really strange. I mean, the centre is blocked. Why am I playing a rook to d1? And after all, black's advancing the kingside pawns. Aren't I thinking of doing something about that? What on earth is this? And it only gets stranger, because queen e8 is played by the engine, and then afterwards bishop d3. And then I'm really getting lost, because we played the bishop to e2 first of all, then to c4. We supported it with the queen on e2, and now we're playing bishop d3, and together with rook d1. It just feels really strange, this. yeah, I mean the one thing that you can say though, is that obviously the bishop on c4 didn't have so much purpose, because after e6, well, you will be able to take on e6 or allow black to take on d5 and get a knight into d5, and then in that case, yeah, okay, I'll give you that. The rook on d1 is doing quite well. But still, okay, fine, redeploying the bishop, all that stuff. But what is white actually doing here actively? I mean, I was looking at trying to find more active moves. Yeah, b4, as I said, or I was even thinking the mysterious rook c1, just because it might actually give some push to a c pawn later. But funnily enough, in that case, then we're just going to take on c4 and go king h8, and the idea is that knight b5 is not dangerous because of c6 now, and if d takes c6, there's queen takes d2, which might give you an idea as to why rook a d1 was a good move from Stockfish. Another point that the move rook a d1 had, simply defending that bishop on d2. But okay, I mean, the key thing is, what on earth is white doing? Well, I mean, one thing that you can point out, is that knight b5 is going to get a threat. When the black queen starts moving away to the king side, then knight b5 attacks c7, a little bit irritating. And once you get in knight b5, of course, then moving the c pawn will be easy because you've moved the bishop out of the way. So, it's one of those weird things, really. I mean, I sort of had the feeling all the time that, I was always getting some sort of glimmer of what the engines were thinking. Getting some sort of little flashes of it, but somehow I was kind of missing the big idea, the thing that makes it all part of things and worthwhile. And well, that only came later. And what I also felt was that the engines were very much doing stuff at precisely the right moment when it was necessary. Whereas, for me, I was, well, since I'm not really grasping the big picture, it's very hard to know what the right moment is, and I was tending to try and make stuff happen too quickly. I think that's very much a human trait in any case, and probably, yeah. I mean, I certainly feel that as a kid, I sort of learned the wrong rhythm for chess. That I always expected things to be going way too fast in chess, whereas sometimes you can get a lot longer games. And well, this is a little bit demonstrated by this, in actual fact. So c5 was played by black here, just to yeah. I mean, actually, it's setting up quite a nice tough structure on the queen side there, and making sure that if something like knight b5 happens, well, you can take, and if ab, you've no longer got this c4 to c5. The pawn's on there. So b3 played because well, there might be little threats of c5 to c4. b3, and now rook f6. And yeah, this is starting to look serious, right? I mean, the rook's coming to h6 and queen h5, or we're looking at h5 and g4. I mean, we could also just play the move h5 in this position, and what are you going to do? What are you going to do there? I'm also threatening to go g4. My queen's coming to g6. I'm going to get around the g file. I mean, white. What's white doing here? Well, I mean, this is quite a nice variation to show. It's not black's best move, h5, but it also shows very effectively what white is actually aiming for. Because the whole thing, the thing that makes it all worthwhile and makes sense, and the reason why white has got time that in my human estimation white didn't have, is because white plays the move g3. And actually, what the engines are saying is that yeah, there's no point. You're not looking for counterplay on the queen side necessarily, or not expending a huge amount of effort on that. If it happens, it happens. But the place where you're really going to get counterplay is against those black on-rushing pawns. Black's got nice and close to you, so we're gonna use that and just attack the stuff that's close to you. And the idea is simply to play rook g1, double up on the g file, and all of a sudden it's the black king that's in danger. And let's just show you a little game of dragons, actually, which went quite nicely in actual fact. So g3, queen f7. This is dragon against stockfish. It's even more thematic than the stockfish game, which I'll show you afterwards because it's quite funny as well. So rook g1, b6, queen g2, king h8, rook df1. You can see all of a sudden the white piece is amassing. Rook g8, h4, and there we are. So the whole thing's turned around, right? I mean, it's no longer, you no longer have the sense of, oh, it's black attacking on the king side here. Now you're saying, oh, black's got to try and hold it all together desperately. And well, I mean, actually, stockfish ended up just sacrificing a pawn like this, just to try and hold it together. But yeah, dragon actually won this fairly convincingly, just gradually whittling away the black position. But I thought it was very powerful, this massing all of a sudden, this move g3 seems to unleash something, and you're playing g3 and h4 and breaking open the king side. What stockfish does is also quite good. Dragon took on g3, and then bishop g5 was played by stockfish, so clearing the g file like that. Bishop h3, rook g1, and yeah, the idea, stockfish giving up the exchange there. Just to keep the G file clear. It's attack. That's what white is doing. Very unexpected, I can tell you. I've mentioned this many times, certainly in books as well, Silicon Road, and many of the videos. It's really one of those human tenets that you don't make a weakening move, a pawn move, on the side where you stand worse, and that was kind of the feeling here. I mean, I stand worse on the king side, so I should just leave it, basically. But yeah, here the engine's just saying, yeah, g3, and sacrificing material and keeping lines open. And yeah, I mean, it just gets very dangerous here. The bishops come in, and yeah, bishop e6. And then the engines feel that, yeah, you can't just lose that pawn and let the d pawn run. So bishop f6 takes played. But yeah, actually, stockfish managed to beat dragon from here. A lot of weak pawns and a lot of entry points, for example, for a white king later on in the endgame. So yeah, I mean, the best move was rook f6. But then still, yeah, some moves happening. I mean, g3, queen h5, rook g1 is one idea, or yeah, rook g1 was played, b6 and g3 again. And I mean, one interesting thing there is that yeah, the engines do their best then to try and get white to close the king side, which is really really funny. So rook g6 was a move I suggested, but we go rook f1, queen f7, and then this lovely move knight d1, and yeah, we're just going to play the knight to f2 and try and get it out to g4 and start the attack. If the knight gets to g4, we get bishop c3 attacking e5, which is another very unpleasant thing. Queen h5 was what the engines played, and then here g4 was played, queen f7, and now opinions vary. I mean, I like very much again what dragon did. I like dragon when it plays these positions. Yeah, it always plays them in an aggressive way that yeah, I would really like. Yeah, yeah, just very nice. Plays move h4 here, and after takes bishop e1. So keeping the king side open there, and then just preparing to come through on the h file, which looked quite interesting to me. Stockfish played h3 in actual fact, and this is also very interesting. After h5, king g2. So yeah, I mean, possibly Stockfish looking to for a long trip over to the queen side, just to get the king safe. So yeah, I mean, there was some aggression there, but with this black maneuver, then yeah, the king side is being sort of closed a little bit. Well, actually, this was a game Stockfish against Dragon. Dragon took the opportunity to take on g4 because if fg, then f3. But okay, after king f2, rook g5, then white had the g file again. So Dragon was actually quite relaxed about the threat on the g file, I have to say, because after rook g1 played king h8, and yeah, I had to look at this for quite a while before grasping what on earth it's all about. You know, rook takes g7 is happening, and well, rook h2 check, we just come back or something. So you know, there's no problem there somehow. But actually, all that you're going to do is to play queen g7 takes, and yeah, this threat of rook h2 and bring the rook onto the h file is quite nasty. So if you play queen f1, you know, to then we just go rook h8, and we're threatening rook h1 and rook h2, or rook h2 and rook h1, and yeah, despite white having a queen and a piece for a couple of rooks, black is actually doing quite well here. Yeah, quite incredible. But yeah, I think you could have played it. You could have taken it just a little bit easier as well if you'd wanted. But anyway, that's how the engines are looking at it. So king e1, bishop f6, rook g2, bishop h3, rook h2, rook g3, king d1, and well, I mean, you know, the position is still quite complicated, but it's clear that black's, you know, not doing so badly. Queen g7 was played, and then rook g1 with the always nice point. Always like this geometry. Takes here. So takes, and a draw soon followed. So yeah, I mean, this was quite interesting in actual fact. I mean, you know, looking at the whole thing, really, you know, I quite liked it for black, I have to say. I definitely quite liked it for black, and I really, you know, I was trying to think, you know, would I be able to handle this properly as white? I mean, obviously now that I've seen how Stockfish did it, then I might have a better go. But still, you know, there's a lot of stuff about timing, you know, and making sure that you play the right moves at the right time, and making sure that you play, you know, this move g3 just at the right time, you know, and not too early, not too late. Otherwise, if you're too late, then you're just getting mated somehow. And you know, I really was thinking, I'm not really sure that I'd fancy playing this as white. I mean, looking at the line, I'm kind of thinking that after knight e5, I'd probably, if I had this as white, I'd probably be more tempted to play the move knight d4, which is you know, not the best move according to the engines, but it should be a slight edge, and yeah, it feels easier to handle than these rather weird positions with knight takes e5. For example, well, if you go c5, I just go knight b3, and then I'm just going to go f4 here. So you know, a6, a4, b6, f4, and then something like bishop b3, and yeah, you know, just a nice space advantage for white. Black can't play e6 because I've taken d6 is hanging, so yeah, that's always slightly inconvenient for black. The move c6 is better, but we do something like a4, a6, f4, bishop f3, takes, you know, and white's got a little edge there. The engines don't think it's anything too serious, but well, you know, at least we're solid, and we're playing bishop e3, and we'll go h3 and maybe g4 and queen e2, and you know, I sort of have the feeling that I could play this better with less stress and effort than the lines with knight takes e5. So that would be my personal recommendation as white, anyway. But certainly this idea of knight e5 looks very, very interesting there. And yeah, I mean, just always fun, you know, looking at these lines with the engines and just following them down any rabbit holes that they dive into, really, you know. And I wasn't really planning to spend much time on the classical, but looking at this was you know, was really, really fascinating. So there we are. Hope you enjoyed that. Hope you found that instructive and useful. If you liked the video, why not give a like, subscribe to the channel, tell your friends, take a look at my new books, Silicon Road to Chess Improvement and Reengineering the Chess Classics, full of stuff like this. And you know, otherwise, thanks very much for watching, and stay tuned. Should have a lot of lovely stuff coming up on this channel. Thanks for watching.